eventually will probably go away, right? That's one measure that's being done right now. I don't know, Mix. Did I fill in too many details there on the portal side?
No, that's absolutely right. So in the back end, actually, even if you do that over the counter, it is through images validation right now. It's going to be the same thing whether you do it on mobile app. It's still through images. We do a validation on the phone, real time. So the end, and then it goes through the clearinghouse. So it still goes through the clearing, through the images. It still goes through the normal process. So ultimately, there's no drop in that level of security. I think it's even more secure for business clients. I think security is always a question for them, right? Because doing your transactions online, and it's not just for mobile check deposit, there's a level of transparency that's you're able to document online. So we know exact date and time when approvers initiated or approved transactions. So we have that level of audit logs. You can always go back to that easily. Whereas if it's pen and paper, it's always harder to do that reconciliation, to go back and to look into that transaction. So there's also that level of transparency. That's a big part of security. And I talk about transparency because transparency for banks for the longest time have always been about mails. So immediate security, right? You get an email if a transaction was created, a transaction. That's always been what transparency meant. But because we're one of the only banks to launch a business-specific mobile app, we're adding more to that transparency. Why? Because we don't only use emails now. You actually receive a push notification. So it's a notification much like you receive on or Facebook or Instagram, for example, where you see real time and you get notified with that red dot that transactions push through, whether it's successful, failed. So you're immediately aware, right? You don't have to go through your hundreds of emails before you get notified. It's much easier, it's much more seamless, it's much more transparent, and ultimately, it's much more secure for your business.
I guess that question comes from the assumption that if it's a picture, it's easier to Photoshop a picture. And the security features, I imagine the tactile experience, the texture of the money, of the check, or something also carries some special security features. I guess that's where the question is coming from. The Photoshop.
Yeah, true. But like I said, there's also the information that's validated on there. We just don't go on the existence of the physical. You can't just duplicate the check and issue it again because that number is immediately tagged into the system across the entire banking network.
Okay, here's another one about checks from Rosaledo, Snapped and Scribbled, from Snapped and Scribbled. The Union Bank CRDAO platform makes it easier for corporations to open a checking account. Union Bank checks can also be deposited digitally with the Philippine Clearing House to make it possible for other banks' checks to also be deposited digitally.
Riggs,
I'll take this. A note there. But I think it's a misconception, or at least maybe previously that was the case where you could only deposit Union Bank on us checks digitally. But actually right now, both for the retail account and for business online, we can actually deposit off us check. So obviously it's still gonna go through that day of clearing. It's much faster to deposit in bank check, but you can actually deposit and make use of that for other bank checks, regardless of which bank.
Okay. I'm not sure if I got that correctly.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't know. Maybe Mix's connection is cutting in and out. But what Mix was saying is that actually you can deposit other banks' checks.
Okay.
It was for a while. I'm not sure. I missed the name of the one asking the question, but it was for a while the case that it could only be Union Bank on us checks. But now you can deposit any bank's checks. 500,000.
Okay. For now, the limit is 500,000.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. We have this question from Mr. Bob Reyes, who asks, what is the survivability rate of corporations which will not adopt digital technology during this pandemic?
If I knew that, I'd be a rich man, right? I need a crystal ball for that kind of a question, Bob. That's a hard one to answer. It's truly challenging, right? And like I said, survivability is somewhere between those companies that are actually going to benefit from digitization and others who are going to be victims of it, right? I mean, it is a disrupting environment, so there are going to be companies severely affected, unfortunately. But that is the global trend, right? That is the trend that is happening. Um, I couldn't answer you honestly, with a hard number, obviously. Pero I would say at least from an attitude, I think overall we collectively benefit from this trend. Like so many other trends in technology and have been perceived as such threats to existential threats for individuals, for businesses, for economies in general. I'd like to think that these would result generally in benefit for all, but always with some pain perhaps during the transition.
Okay, so here is a question from John Michael Bueno. How hard is it to be digitally advanced when other banks are lagging behind? Does it cripple your own ability to innovate, especially with interbank features? So Union Bank, you guys have been ahead in the digital transformation. Is it a bad thing that you're ahead because the others can't keep up?
In a way, yes. In a way, yes. A lot of the features that we'd like to offer are dependent on the counterparty bank being also offering the same capabilities, right? But you said it. The Union Bank is ahead, but the other banks are also on that road, right? To a higher level of digitization and managing the gap or differences between that, right? Are the group-wide organizations. Like I'll make reference again to the government's NRPS program, which has been effected largely through the consortiums that are existing out there, like the PCHC, right? Like our national ATM switch network, BankNet, right? Which we all collectively as banks participate in. And it is there that we are able to deal with those differences and set standards, right? In terms of, common understanding, arrangements for functionality, what can it do, even in terms of, commercial models, who pays for what, we have to standardize, right? So there is venue for this. And yeah, perhaps there's a gap, there's a timing difference there, but banks are moving forward, and as they do pursue their own digital transformations, they will be able to offer a lot of services of the type that Union Bank has already been offering.
Of course, when you talk about digital, it's all about being connected, your connection as well, the quality of your connection. This is a question from Monsi Serrano of the Philippine Business and News, who asks, do you consider connectivity as a challenge in embarking digitalization? If so, how does Union Bank plan to address this using your own system?
Okay, so I'll take that to mean, the issues with telecoms, right? Connectivity, right? Being not available necessarily in all areas, right? As I kind of mentioned kanina, I think that's changing. I think you will see the telcos kind of step up and continue to roll out services in more areas. But between now and there are other technologies that use to kind of like work around these approaches. For example, we are working on enabling communities of I don't want to get into too much detail here. This is still developmental. But what we're doing is like working with communities, part of a supply chain, a food supply chain, and just leave it there. And these are in remote areas where the participants are not necessarily wired, and because there simply is no connectivity. So you can actually use short range or like Wi-Fi technologies that are like short range, meaning short in terms of kilometers around. So you can capture entire communities doing these kinds of things, right? So these are the transitional kind of solutions that are going to be adopted. But again, as digitization gets adopted, we're going to see more and more ubiquity in terms of the availability of connectivity, and that should be we have to make that bet going forward, right? But in the meantime, there are creative solutions to get things done.
We have this from Miss Doris Dumlao Abadilla from Inquirer. What's the percentage of your corporate client base that has migrated to digital channels? I think we asked this earlier, but could you give us a number at least? And how much was it before the pandemic? Just for comparison, for those that have yet to digitize, what is holding them back?
Mix, I think you have a better sense of. Let's just use the adoption of Portal as a bridge.
Yeah. So I actually have the numbers, specific numbers. It's about 25% September 2019. Now it's about 65% are online banking, and they consider the base is different. So we had much less clients back then. So we've grown the number of clients this year, of course, that's to be expected. And yet the rate of digital adoption has also increased. So 60% is actually a bigger number now. So that's kind of the rough figures of growth. So yeah, there is a big push. A lot of it was driven by the pandemic. We don't force clients to go digital. We don't have that ability. But what we've done is just make it as easy as possible for them to migrate. So like my metaphor a while ago, it's just making a really nice airport so that everybody migrates to digital, right? So we're ready for them. And it just so happens that the pandemic was what ultimately pushed them over to do that.
And what seems to be holding them back? I imagine the mindset needs a change as well. But for example, I wanted to raise this issue about check payments. A lot of the corporate clients still prefer a check-based payment system because they say this offers customers legal remedies because the law is very clear with regards to criminal liability and recourse to check issuers in the event that their checks bounce.
Yeah, very true. Totally true. In certain industries, we still see the practices of, issuance of post-dated checks and the like, right? And this surety of holding to such documents is well, as you put it, provides lots of legal remedies in the issues of conflicts. Yeah, that is true. And that's the state of the law is today. It's because really of the precedent that's been set, right? It's all established around, the traditional negotiable instruments law, well established there, right, in the court system. So yes, and I don't think that's going to go away necessarily overnight, but I think going forward, the government is also working on those areas in terms of giving digital payments the same kind of I don't know, I'm no lawyer, but the same kind of gravitas or weight that the physical document would do, right? But that's not just the only thing holding back. In other industries, when you're talking about, if for example, the issue of checks as evidence is common practice wherein there is less level of trust between the entities. But when you talk about trust, there are many other technologies that come around to address a lot of these things. I won't get into it, but things like blockchain technologies can mitigate a lot of those issues, which are underlying on those, the need for checks, right? If you have a lot more information about what your customer or the one paying you is doing, where he's at, etc., maybe you won't have that kind of concerns, right? Yeah, and so there are other industries though where check payments are perhaps that the holding of physical check is not so relevant. Especially when you're talking about regular trading partners, regular suppliers. That's less of an issue. Those are big areas where you'll see first more rapid adoption of checklist payments.
Okay, we have a few more minutes to take a few more questions. So for the participants, feel free to join in on the discussion. Just type your questions in the Q&A box. That's at the lower right-hand side of the Zoom toolbar. So I guess, could you give us a big picture? How many people of Union Bank right now? How many people are working in Union Bank, and how many of them are still work from home? And do you imagine this is going to be on a more permanent basis beyond the COVID pandemic?
Wow, it's a good question. I think we at Union Bank surprised ourselves when the pandemic hit in how easily, if I could use that word, we were able to adopt to this work from home kind of setup, right? Um, so for many of us who are not on the, accessing core systems, right, transactional core systems, it was an automatic kind of transition because again because all of our internal way of working and our setup is not based on this kind of existing physical presence kind of relationships, right? Um, and we have a very agile setup to begin with, right? Which doesn't really look at who's punching in and who's punching out. We're ready to adopt that. But even for those other processes in a bank, which you can imagine require a lot of sensitive access to sensitive systems. Again, I go back to digital transformation. So many of our processes to begin with are digital from the start, and they're accessible online. And we provide the necessary higher level of security that our people need to be able to perform this kind of work from home, right? And that continues on today. So it's actually a very small percentage. I'm not going to give a number because I think my operations head's going to kill me if I make a mistake here. But we have really just the absolute minimum number of people who need to be at the offices, right? In other words, in terms of the people that could not actually work from home, is actually a very small number. However, when it comes to other things like, the branches, right? We did want to keep them open, and we did. We did pretty much keep them all open. The branches that we closed is because we chose to close them because they were, like we have some branches located in hospital areas. We think this probably not at this time because we wanted to manage those down, right? But also to kind of get to the latter part of your question, even while we continue to work at home and we're able to do it productively, there is something about the camaraderie and the interaction of being with your coworkers in the workspace, right? So we are providing a pathway for our teams to start to interact with each other on premise. Eventually, we have to come up with a balance. We think, though, that like many things that have surfaced out of this experience, that it's going to change the new normal. There are all sorts of studies now say anything from 30% will be the impact in terms of the reduction of people going to the office on a regular basis. There'll be some sort of a hybrid blend. Maybe that's where it will go. We're not too sure yet. But whatever it is and whatever function it is, I think we will be able to adapt. And we also want to do it in a way that keeps the wellness of our people, top of mind as well. This is, I don't know about you, but working at home is tough. It's great in some aspects, but it's tough, right?
Mm-hmm. That's true. Okay, so that's the work from home. There was a clarificatory question from Ms. Ditas, I believe. Miguel, when you talked about the 65% migration, that is for the portal, so for to corporate clients.
Yeah, the base there is for corporate clients, but we are working in moving that number much higher by the end of the year. Of course, we want to go for 100%. So yeah, that is a number that we look to improve on further.
Okay, and going back to the digital experience, fund transfers, everybody's doing fund transfers. It's a major bank activity today. Fees. One of the common concerns would be fees, which in progressive countries are not there. Do you imagine the Philippine banking system ever getting to that point when we don't have to charge these fees for online transactions?
Well, I'll give an answer. First of all, we've waived fees until the end of the year, both for not just for the individual but also for businesses. We found that it's very important during this time, especially since the economy is always a common topic on how we sustain it. So we find that doing transfer seamlessly is very important. So we're one of the first banks, or we are the first bank, I think, to waive it until the end of the year. So I'm just going to say that first and foremost. After that, I think maybe Sir Mon will be better to discuss.
Thanks for throwing that back to me, Mix.
Yeah.
Can I imagine a future where there will be this fees interbank transfers will be free? Yes, I can imagine.
When?
There will come a time. I don't have a crystal ball. Did you send me one, Michelle? When at some point when pretty much everybody is using this every day, right? In every aspects of our lives, right? And that number that's cited by Governor Jokno really grows up to some meaningful. Again, remember what I said earlier. The thing about digital is that it allows scaling and it drives down costs when you think of it on a mass basis. Eventually, costs will go down, right? As this all scales up, the incremental cost for each additional transaction gets only smaller and smaller and smaller, right? And at that point, maybe it won't be completely free. Maybe there'll always be some small fee, but it'll come to a point where that will be, almost it will be minimal, right? And it will not really be an issue or a hindrance to using it, right? So that's why at the bank, even while we do still need to do charges, we are doing things like to recover our costs. Simply put, we are doing things like trying to extend the period where we're making it for free. We are encouraging customers to use it because we really think it's the way of the future.
Before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask this question from you from an executive perspective when you look at the big picture, because there was an interview of Wall Street big banking executives, CEOs, and we were asked what keeps you up at night. And the common answer was the real competition for them would be platform businesses. Businesses like Alibaba or Tencent or Grab, they provide the needs and wants that you and I have that are not necessarily banking, but they're seamlessly integrated with banking. And eventually people just do almost everything there, including banking needs. Is this also keeping you up at night? What do you think of this space here in the Philippines?
Is it keeping me up at night? Maybe not keeping me up at night, but it certainly gives me a lot to think about, right? Because if you look at our attitude, and I think you're touching on what people like to call about the threat of the fintechs, right? That are coming about, right? What you have with the fintechs is that they've got this very special, unique capability, right? They're not a bank. They don't have the mandate, or they're not required to provide the full range of banking services, right? They get to pick and choose, right? They will want to say, okay, we're gonna do merchant payments. We're gonna disrupt merchant payments. We're gonna disrupt remittances. We're gonna disrupt this or that, right? And you know what? They come up with some excellent solutions, right? And it does give us they could give us a run for our money, as it were, right? In these areas, right? But they're also not able to provide the full depth, right? That a bank can do. So at least for the meantime, the banks will still have a big role, right? Simply because of the traditional franchise that a bank is given, that role of trust that comes with the government, that a government issued banking license, right? That these fintechs, although they have ways of getting, they are of course legitimate and they are registered, etc. They don't have the same depth and breadth. And of course, when it comes to other things, the size of the institution and basically the balance sheet that a bank can bring to fore when trying to make meaningful change in an environment, right? So what am I getting at? What I'm getting at really is that we have a role to play, I suppose. Maybe the fintechs are keeping us on our toes, but we found that it's better to work with them and to partner with them because we can learn a lot from them, and there's a lot that we can do together with them. And that's been the approach. I think Union Bank, I believe, was the first to have a dedicated fintech business unit. So we have a unit which is sort of like a customer relationship group and more that works with fintechs. We welcome fintechs. We want to work with them. We have worked with them. We are working with them. So we have a very open approach to them because we think that together we make for a much better solution than individually.
Okay, we're running out of time. Final question for both Mon and Miguel, answerable by one word. What is one word to describe Union Bank 10 years from today? 10 years from today.
One word, just one word.
Just one word.
That'll have to be digital.
For me, valuable.
Okay, digital and valuable. Gentlemen, thank you so much for the discussion this morning, and that's it.